Hello everyone. Today I have this wonderful Mika deck for you with Fischl and Escoffier. Now let's quickly look over the deck itself before we get into the games. We of course have the new elemental transfiguration for mostly dice fixing, of course, since we are running a superconduct deck anyway, we might as well use this card. Other than that, we have some draw power with Sealy and Strategize, as well as Chang the Ninth. And of course, because we are running Escoffier and with Mika you want to do normal attacks, we get into all of that in the games themselves. But for now, because we are running Escoffier, which of course the passive skill gives us food, and some food cards are good with Mika, we are running Chef Mao. Gladiator, of course, to cheapen normal attacks, Mika's talent, and Moon Piercer for extra damage along with the Cryo Resonance. Because of course we can get access to Cryo Resonance with this deck, and of course Moon Piercer is also good since we have two characters who can equip it. They aren't that it's only really this card, the weapon and the talent card, that are the must-haves. Everything else just go with whatever you like to use, sort of stuff. Anyway, let's get into the games where I more properly explain what this deck is about. Now a quick disclaimer: as per usual, in my first game I do not have exactly the same deck as you just saw. You can see I have a different arcane card here. Lost Legacies in the Sand works also with this deck if you need that extra draw power to look for Cryo Resonance, for example, but I did later come to the conclusion that Covenant of Rock is the better choice if you want to be more aggressive. The starting with this deck is very simple. Because you are guaranteed good dice with the Elemental Transfiguration, start with Fischl, do a Fischl skill, go to Escoffier, do an Escoffier skill. If possible, if your opponent gives you that superconduct reaction, then pick the Deep Freeze and Blade round 1. Because we want it on the field to nerf our opponent and guarantee us good dice. You can see here in this match my opponent gives me the reaction. Not all opponents do this, but some of them do. When you see the possibility for it. Also, always with this deck, always go for the Deep Freeze. You are not doing enough superconducts for the other. I don't remember the name right now, but the other one, the 3 cost, is not worth it for this deck. You are not doing enough superconducts. So instead, always go for the Deep Freeze. It does have the advantage that you can play it round 1 if you do this simple rotation. Also, you can see there, let's wait a moment. Now you can see our summons activate the Deep Freeze's effect, which is why my opponent now has cost increase. This is also one of the reasons why if you get this card round 1, you want to play it round 1. But once again, most opponents do not let you get that reaction before the end phase, because of course in the end phase it is guaranteed by our summons. Most opponents will not give you this reaction, which is why you usually play it at the start of round 2, which is also one of the reasons why Covenant of Rock is actually better than Lost Legacies in the Sand, but I'll get to that in a moment as round 2 begins here. Also, even though we don't really have use for Electro Dice, which the Superconduct Blessing guarantees us, those Electro Dice can be used for Moon Piercer, because now you only need 1 more Electro Dice or 1 Omni Dice and you have the needed dice for Moon Piercer, which is why the Electro Dice are good to keep. Round 2 we want to go for Mika. More specifically, most of the time round 2 you want to go for a Mika skill into 2 normal attacks. That's your round 2 with this deck. Once again, why are we running a Deep Freeze? Like I mentioned, you are not doing enough superconducts with this deck, so that the other blessing is not worth it. And also, this way you can see when after allied character this physical or cryo damage, that's untunable cost increase as we saw there earlier. This is just very good because I mean we are on Mika, we are only doing cryo and physical damage. And now I think before you get to see it in action, it's a good time to go over Mika's kit. Mika is in fact normal attack, I should say discount or buff, probably say buffing. Mika buffs normal attacks as with the skill you get Soul Wind. Soul Wind after an allied character uses normal attack, so not your first normal attack after this skill, your second normal attack after the use of the skill costs 2 fewer unaligned element. 2 fewer unaligned element also means that there's no reason to play Mintimeat rolls with this deck, because you would have to do so many normal attacks to get value out of Mintimeat rolls that it's simply not worth it for Mika to use Mintimeat rolls, which is why we have the 0 cost, what it was, Northern Smoked Chicken. But anyway, you always want to start with skill and then go for 2 normal attacks. Why? Because of Mika's passive skill. After this character uses skill, +1 damage to your next instance of physical damage. To my knowledge, this can also be from physical damage summons, even though those ones are rare, but they do exist. But any source which your characters or summons do, or any instance where your characters or summons do physical damage, this one should buff it by 1. And it can activate twice per round. So the reason why you want to go with Mika elemental skill 2 normal attacks is because when you do Mika's first elemental skill, it activates the passive. So the skill does 2 damage, then you do the passive, then the passive activates, your next normal attack will deal 3 damage, and then if you do that first normal attack, your next normal attack will have the passive, the second activation, as well as the Soul Wind effect, meaning that with Mika, by doing a skill into 2 normal attacks, you deal 7 damage. Because it's gonna be, no, hold on, not 7, 8. My apologies, 8 damage, because it's 2 normal attacks, both of which do 3 damage, and then the skill does 2, so it's 8 damage for 7 dice. Of course, that is not the most damage you can do for 7 dice, but it's a very good considering this is without any buffs. So Mika alone, just by doing a skill into 2 normal attacks, without talent, without weapon, without anything, for 7 dice, which you can means, 7 dice, you can do it every round. Every round you can do 8 damage by sitting on Mika. And of course, when you combo that into Moon Piercer, which the skill into 2 normal attacks add Moon Piercer, now it's from 8 damage into 11 damage. And if you have the talent card gives Soul Wind +2 damage, meaning that your skill into 2 normal attacks combo deals +2 damage. So having the talent card increases that combos. The skill into 2 normal attacks combo with talent card, it's going to be 10 damage. With weapon, it's going to be 11. With talent card and weapon, it's going to be 13 damage for 7 dice. Assuming you have already played Moon Piercer, of course, the round you do play Moon Piercer, it's going to be 8 dice, but I mean, I'm sure you can manage with. That's why we have Golden Troops reward and stuff like that. The extra dice is free switches to make up for that difference. Anyway, now that I've explained it, let's see it in action. There we go with the Moon Piercer into the talent card and the first skill. Of course it activates the Superconduct's Blessing, which is once again here simply to annoy our opponent. The more you activate this, the more likelier it is that your opponent's important cards, like in this matchup, I was of course hoping that the cost increase goes to my opponent's, you know, weapon or technique on Huta, because they do use the Tatangasaurus technique and the Jade Spear in that deck, so having those cards cost increased would be very, very good. You saw their idea normal attack, the passive talent has already gone away. The second passive comes and then you can see, well, kind of went very fast, but there was the Soul Wind, which is why it costed only 1 die to do a normal attack, which did 6 damage thanks to the talent card, which gives it +2 physical damage. We'll get to see that again, so no trouble there. Oh yeah, quick mention, burst. The burst is a stall thing. The burst doesn't really give anything for this combo I just mentioned. The skill into 2 normal attacks. The burst is a -1 dice for 3 HP for your Mika. That's what the burst does. The burst is good if you want to like combo it with another character. Like Mika with Riotsley, for example. Then like go for Mika burst, then go to Riotsley. The burst is if you want to use Mika as a support. If you want to use Mika as a DPS, go for the skill into 2 normal attacks. That is the better combo. Now of course, unfortunately, none of the cost increase went the sort of important cards. We can see our opponent played the Jade Spear, but at least they do not have the technique. So their deck isn't quite capable of doing a full sweep here. I of course go for some extra protection here. Mika is the main DPS for this deck, but of course because Mika is quite fragile with only 10 HP and quite minimal healing from the burst, oftentimes your matches with this deck will be the sort of where Mika takes out the 1 or 2 important characters from the opponent, and then Visual and Escoffier have to finish the game off. But if your opponent doesn't respect your damage, Mika is easily able to sweep round 3. Anyway, let's get into the next game. Now, if I remember correctly, from this game onwards we should have the newer version, at least I hope I picked. Okay, this is still the old version, I do apologize for that. We only have 2 games for the updated version of the deck, but I suppose you can use these first 2 games as a showcase that Lost Legacies of Sand also is perfectly fine to use with this deck. It is like Lost Legacies of Sand or the Covenant of Rock. Only other I could maybe say might work would be Day of Resistance as a way to protect Mika, but honestly the deck type is where you use Mika to round 2, deal a lot of damage, and then round 3 if your opponent hasn't done damage to Mika, you can swipe with Mika, and if they have done damage, then you can use Visual and Escoffier. You can see here in this matchup, this is the more usual what you see. Your opponent doesn't give you the Elemental Transfiguration. The opponent doesn't give you the reaction which would activate the Elemental Transfiguration, which is why usually you can have that 1 die which is left off from switching after the 2 skills and switch. You can use that last dice to play a Sealy, play a Strategize, play something. But at the start of round 2 we want to get the Deep Freeze on the field, because you know, in some cases, I don't think we have any of those matches in my replays today, but some cases, especially if you don't get either the weapon, you don't get, okay, I'm trying to say too many things at once. In the matches where at the start of round 2 you don't have a weapon or Mika's talent card, it's not always the best to go for Mika. You usually want to, but it's not the best. In those cases, going for Escoffier Burst with either refresh the skill or normal attack and then burst, or simply go for one Mika skill, then switch off and end your round by doing some ramping with Escoffier's food or something like that. So most of the time round 2 you want to immediately go for Mika, go for the skill in the 2 normal attacks. In the rare cases where you don't have talent or weapon and the enemy is playing a very aggressive deck, where you know the lack of talent or weapon means that you cannot match their damage, it's better to go for Escoffier Burst. I think also in this matchup I do go for at least an Escoffier normal attack. We of course don't know if they are going to take out Shenhe here. No, if Shenhe is going to take out Escoffier here or not.
Unleash!
In this case they do take out, which means it was very good that I didn't go for Mika, because Mika is the more important character here. Escoffier is in fact the number 1 character to sacrifice in this deck. That's why the round 1 rotation is from Visual to Escoffier, because you can apply Cryo with Mika as well, you don't need Escoffier. Also, like, Escoffier's only late game advantage comes from the healing burst, which is only really good against AoE damage decks. But against AoE damage decks you can usually just Mika sweep round 2 one important character and round 3 finish the game. Of course it's dependent on the matchup and such. But because I now opponent has played both of their Cryo Resonances, Frost Operative does not have a burst, we should be absolutely fine ending our round here on Mika. Of course the Tideseal Stone annoying a bit here. Of course, funny enough, 1 Mystic Soup got 2 cost increases. But once again, do not forget that the Deep Freeze is also annoying our opponent. Of course, right now they don't have any, but once an attack is done here, you're gonna see the talent card comes in the way. You're gonna see the untunable cost increase shows up. And all they can do is go for a normal attack, which of course means I have already won the game. Like, that looks like I'm doing some basic BMing here. But actually now that I remember, here is the detector, this is the discount from the Soul Wind, and the explosive beacon, this is the talent card damage increase. And of course these effects go to the first character you do a normal attack with after using Mika's skill. Which of course with this deck Mika is our damage dealer, we aren't really switching characters or anything, but you can see here the damage potential is there with this deck. Anyway, in the next match we finally should have the updated version of the deck. Now here we go, we have a electro-charged deck from our opponent with Roron and Ifa, so this seems like a little harder matchup. Of course, you saw there, whenever you do get the deep Superconduct Blessing card in your starting hand, it's of course you want it in your deck. Because we only have Cryo and Electro characters, that card is guaranteed in our to come from the deck. We never want it in our starting hand, if possible, because there's of course the chance that it comes into our starting hand when switching cards. Like I kind of hinted in the last match, you always want to keep either the talent card or Moonpiercer in your starting hand. Draw power is not that important if you have these cards in your hand. Superconduct Blessing, that card guarantees us good dice. The only really important thing is to get a weapon, ideally a weapon, or the talent card to increase the damage.
A dash of frosting!
Because with that, of course, like I mentioned earlier, your damage goes from 8 to 10 or 11 depending on which one you get. And of course 10 damage is enough to take out most characters in the game. I could also mention most of the damage with this deck, with the combo, with the Mika combo. The most damage comes from the 2 normal attacks, not so much from the skill. They come from the 2 normal attacks. And which is why in the cases where your opponent switches character after that skill, you are more often than not still able to take out one of the opponent's characters. We of course go for Mystic Soup. We get Providence here, but we are of course not using it for the skill because we want to play Moonpiercer and a talent card. So we use it for a normal attack. I mean, at this point the likelihood that my opponent can do anything is quite small, which is why I was feeling confident in that move. Now, for a moment here it does look quite bad for me. My opponent has clearly more HP. All of my characters are low HP and they have an AoE damage deck. Very, very bad looking, but don't worry, Mika is quite good at dealing damage.
Save more.
We of course go for the Covenant of Rock. This is also one reason why Covenant of Rock is better than the Lost Legacies in Sand. You can use it to switch off from Mika and then use the last dice for some setup, like in this case a strategize, but you could have also played the Treasure Seeking Seal. Now once again, in this sort of scenario, there's nothing wrong with going for Escoffier Burst. It's anyway going to activate the Superconduct Blessing, it's anyway going to annoy our opponent, and all of our characters do need healing, so it's a perfectly good move to go for Escoffier Burst here. Of course my opponent is threatening to take out Escoffier, but once again that doesn't really matter. Because if they take out Escoffier, we are just going to go for Mika and try to go for the same
Not too far now.
combo again. Of course in this case my opponent does get a fast action switch from Gathering to Auroron, so Escoffier is out of the game, but hey, look at that, another Providence, which means we are able to do quite a lot of damage. I tried to tune everything here so that I could play Gladiators.
Final warning.
Which I can if I, play Shattering Ice, but I don't actually need to do any of that, because the Soul Wind, once again, it discounts 2 normal dice. So we have more than enough damage and dice, or just enough dice, but more than enough damage to finish off the game. Yeah, let's get into the last game of today. Now in this last game it ended up, well, it was funny enough it was a mirror matchup basically. They do have a slightly different action cards of course, but it
The threads of your fate
I think
lie
this
in my
matchup
hands.
shows the meaning of why the Superconduct Blessing, it actually does have a role in this deck. Like it's not here just to fix your dice. The dice fixing is the number one thing with it.
No rest for the wicked.
The cost increase when you pick the deep
A little
freeze
boost.
blessing
Ready to
is
spice things up.
important as well, and this match proves it.
Off to the freezer.
Of course, also this deck is not
No rest for the
exactly
wicked.
I mean, I created this deck and then I saw others playing it as well, as you can see here, so I'm not going to claim any, I was the first to make this deck sort of stuff here, but it was quite funny to see that others have came to the same conclusion that this sort of deck was very good for Mika. Now round 1 here at first looks good for me as, you know, they play Liven but they get no dice for it. I played Golden Troop and Chef Mao, so I actually have some setup for the next round. But I actually get rather unlucky here with 2 Wave-Kissed Sands. Not what you want to get. Overall the +2 damage and +2, well, it's +2 healing basically. Those food cards are of course what you really want to get. The Wave-Kissed Sands is simply not that good for this deck. Neither is the Verdant. No, it's not Verdant Gift, but the anyway +1 damage to all characters.
Alright. Everything's
Those
ready.
ones aren't that good, but you can play them to proc Chef Mao, like I do here, so that I actually get some better food cards for the following rounds.
Engaging.
I also have the talent here, so my setup is looking very good. But here you can see my opponent got Gilded Hall, so I guess the other +1 damage to our character was the Wave-Kissed Sands. No, Verdant Gift. Verdant Gift, I think. I really don't, I don't remember all of the food cards. It's Verdant Gift, and I think Autumn Frost is the +2 healing, right? Anyway, you can see my opponent Cryo Resonance, Gilded Hall, and judging by their dice. Actually, let's go and see. Yeah, you can see here, this card got the cost increase, so none of the important cards got a cost increase. Very, very good for my opponent, of course, because they are able to play that for all the normal amount of dice. But look at this, cost increase into Covenant of Rock. This basically means I cannot play it, because it can only be played when you have 0 elemental dice left, and you know. At least I mean I didn't try playing it when I have 1 dice, because I assumed it simply wouldn't work, but like that, this is the importance of Deep Freeze in this deck. When it actually strikes an important card in your opponent's deck, it does affect the game quite a lot. So even though I had the better setup in this match, simply by the fact that they were able to get the more important card, I now have to sacrifice Mika. Because of course I was planning to go for the Covenant of Rock switch characters like I did in the previous games.
I'm sorry, everyone.
Of course some upside is the fact that I have the setup from Wave-Kissed Sands, and their Mika is quite low. They have no, I mean, after playing Gilded Hall and Cryo Resonance, the likelihood that they are able to one-tap Escoffier here is very, very small. With the added benefit that if they now do a normal attack, they lose the Soul Wind effect, because I of course will just simply do a normal attack onto Mika. Close with the call-in for cleanup, they only got 1, not both, but look at that. Now my Mystic Soup is cost increased, my Cryo Resonance is cost increased. Very, very bad for me. I still go for the Mystic Soup and I get Providence, so it kind of evens out there. But you can see, I do the normal attack. Let's go see if they got any significant cost increases. Okay, their Covenant of Rock also got a cost increase. That's kind of decent. Like that was definitely the most important character card in their hand currently. Of course, you could also argue that I haven't lost yet is very good for them, but I mean they could burst either way. I have no way of taking them out before a burst here.
The pinnacle of excellence.
And like also the cost increase onto that card wouldn't really have affected their capability to burst. But you can see here the game is very, very close. Now here you can see if there was no cost increase on the Cryo Resonance, I could burst and take out with the Cryo Resonance and take out the Escoffier, but because there is the cost increase on the Cryo Resonance, I unfortunately am unable to do that.
Shadow Raven,
And
let
of
night
course,
fall.
they did have the White Glove and Fisherman. The likelihood that they are now going to draw that +1 damage is very, very high. And you know, of course, I now get the Woven Dive that would have won me the game. But alas, my opponent does get that extra damage they need to win the game. So yeah, that is the importance of Deep Freeze. Don't bother with the other blessing, go for Deep Freeze, because it's also cheaper to play and you only really need it, most of the time you only really need it for the dice fixing. Anyway, that's all for today. I'll see you all in the next one.